Everyone was sitting on pins and needles, waiting with 100% confidence that the Rebbe is going to get up from before Chof Zayin Adar and after Chof Zayin Adar. And afterwards, that the Rebbe was going to get up and be Megala, that he is the King Moshiach that we've been waiting for thousands of years, and march us into Eretz Yisrael with the Beis HaMikdash and the whole thing. Lamata B'sar Tvachim, and like whatever else we say every Shabbos after a good vort.
Yeah, and everybody was just like, saying, it's like, oh, this is it, the Rebbe is Megala. I mean, we lived on, that's how it was,
Welcome everybody to Greeting Mashiach. Today we have a very, very special interview. We have two very, very special people. We have Dovid Feldman and Miriam Racquel Feldman. Dovid is a licensed marriage and family counselor, and Miriam is a lot of things, marriage coach, anxiety and trauma specialist, but one thing that we know her for is her very special book that she wrote, God Said What? Hashtag My Orthodox Life. And I suggest everybody to either at the end of this interview, listening to this interview, or at any time that you have to go pick up the book.
Pause this interview, read the book, and come back.
And then come back. Correct. There you go. All right. So we'll just, I guess, jump right in. And I guess if whichever one of you want to start, I guess go through a little background of your life, for those people that didn't read the book.
Yeah. I'll start first just because I was the first one to be introduced to, Orthodox Judaism. Our path, actually, we met in college before we became observant in the cornfields of Iowa. And that's where Meryl and I became friends. And we were living more of a liberal lifestyle at the time. Eventually, I made my way to Eretz Yisrael. My sister was getting engaged there, and I was one of those Rabbi Schusterman, Rabbi Meir Schuster. The song that Mordechai ben David made popular about backpackers standing at the kotel, and somebody knocks on your shoulders and asks if you want to come for Shabbos. I was one of those kids at the time, and I got dragged. Serendipity. Yeah. I got dragged off to Mea Sharim for my first, traditional Orthodox Shabbos, Hasidic Shabbos, and I made my way to Eish Torah, and then I invited my wife to come visit me there. And you two have read the book, so you know the story. But I started off more in the Litvish, more Orthodox, derech that way, and only got introduced to Chabad after my wife and I decided that it was time for us to try again.
to date again.
And as you know, it was a very interesting and turbulent experience for both of us. But thank God it worked out.
And now we're marriage therapists and coaches.
There you go.
Says a lot. Yeah, so my journey was very different, obviously. So I grew up, secular Jewish, and kind of rejected the religion. I always studied the Holocaust and that kind of thing, but I didn't believe in religion, and Judaism just was, what I knew of it. It didn't appeal to me. So even when people would ask me, "Are you Jewish?" or "What are you?" I would never even say I was Jewish, And so I was living in Berkeley, California, and David and I had already graduated. He had been traveling abroad, and we went our own separate ways. But there would be letters every once in a while, and then all the letters stopped, and I had no idea what happened to him. And I was about to go to Guatemala to help save refugees, and I was living my nice Berkeley life there, and I received this 13-page letter. And in the letter, he was saying he was doing these things in Israel. Somehow he landed up in Israel instead of being in Europe, where I thought he was. And he's, eating a certain diet, and he's wearing white strings. And I knew nothing, nothing. And I was just like, what is he doing? But he said something about I should, come to Israel, and I should check out what he's doing. So I literally looked up rabbi in the Berkeley Yellow Pages, and and went to see a rabbi there. And the rabbi looked at the, return address, Isha Torah, and he read the letter, a little book, and then he's just like, he's in a cult, and you got to go get him out. And I said, well, I'm supposed to leave for Guatemala. I don't want to go to Israel. And he said, well, that'll be it. If you don't get him out, you'll just, he'll be gone. So that was very frightening. And so I made the decision to, I actually spoke to him on the phone, and he really sounded far gone. I could not understand what he was talking about, miracle, God, all these things. And I really thought, this is it. They got him. So I got a whole bunch of feminist, Jewish books, and I hopped on a plane, and he wouldn't pick me up at the airport because I must have landed on Shabbos. And I go to the old city, and I met more people that God just sets things up in very, incredible ways. So I keep meeting people who all talk about, I was here last year. Now look at me now, got married and with hair coverings and yarmulkes and miracles. And I was like, oh my gosh, everybody here is a nutcase. And it was terrifying. And then I saw him, and he wouldn't even give me a hug, and I had come all this way. And so, and that started the journey, and he wanted me to learn there. And we really did argue through the streets of, the old city, and people did tell us to be quiet. But I was like, I was really frightened. I was like, I got to get this guy out of the cult that the rabbi said he was in, and he sounded, and I grew up right next to Monsey. I grew up in New York next to Monsey, but it was like, I never met any Monsey people. I never met any Orthodox Jews. So I never even heard of some of the stuff he was talking about. So my journey was very different. His mother's Israeli, and he had gone to Solomon Schechter. So he was familiar with a lot of things. I never saw tefillin. I never knew of this. So it was just kind of a shocking, way to, kind of dive into observant Judaism. And I was much slower and much more resistant. And I thought I'd prove something to all the rabbis and Rebbitzins there.
Something they never thought of.
Yeah, they were all cool and
they
friendly.
Never heard any of these arguments.
Yeah, I thought I knew better. Then his father came, and even his father was excited about what he was learning, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So again,
my father and Rabbi Cutler became really good friends.
Yeah, so my journey was just he eventually left because he had to finish college. I stayed to learn a little bit more, and there were some things that appealed to me, as you saw in the book, but I just couldn't get into this. I couldn't understand God. I couldn't, I just, the codes went right over my head. Isha Torah talks about codes, and it's in the Torah, and I just it was, everything kept going over my head basically. And so there were a few things that were just kind of okay, this is a very interesting perspective. Maybe there's truth here, but I went back to Berkeley, and then I started to kind of explore, Judaism that way, but more, I was kind of living between two worlds. I'd go out to clubs sometimes Friday nights, but then other nights I'd spend Shabbos with Chabad there. And I started to learn. And then someone said to me, if you really want to learn, you should go to Minnesota. So I went to Rabbi Friedman and Beis Khan in Minnesota. And that was the perfect place. I actually packed my car up and drove there. And I would just ask all the questions. And he was excellent at, not just answering them, but a whole different perspective on things. You have a Jewish soul. This is who you are. And then I just realized, wow, it's who I am. So no matter what I do, it's just always there. And somehow that just really struck home. A lot of truths kind of, struck home. And then I went to Crown Heights, and then I wrote to him in Israel. I said, look, I'm doing this too. And, now we can get married. Everything's good. And then I don't hear from him. And then he's like, no, I don't know if this is going to work. And I'm learning. And then it was kind of but it's God with the carrot on the stick, and then drops the carrot. And then I get to make a decision, who am I doing this for? And I felt I had learned enough, and it was meaningful enough to me and truthful enough to me that I just couldn't go back to, the way I was living and thinking before. So I just plodded on and kept learning. And then I was swept up in Crown Heights with the whole, Rebbe and Moshiach fervor that was happening. And that's, that was my path. And so then, just the
so
story.
Just to give some reference point here, this whole story started and ended in what year approximately?
I went to Israel in 1989.
Yeah, 89.
And then my wife was invited there in that summer.
In 89, yeah.
In 89. Yeah.
And you guys get married in
92. 92, yeah, 1992.
Yeah, she was born in 92, yeah.
92. Wow, beautiful.
That's yeah. So I guess you spoke about the time you were in Crown Heights. If you can, I guess, unpack that and start, I guess, from the beginning of when you were introduced to Chabad. I guess was it right? Your introduction to Chabad was through Rabbi Friedman. You started learning the Tanya and all about your soul and that whole thing. And then when you got to Crown Heights, you started learning with Rabbi Majeski?
Yes. Yeah, I went to Machon Chana, that's what it was called then, with Rabbi Majeski, and it was wonderful because, like, the Rebbe would speak, and then you'd go to school at Machon Chana, Rabbi Majeski would have it all translated for us and just constantly sharing with us what was being said. So it was like living and breathing everything. And Mrs. Gansberg was in the dorm. It was very alive time.
Can you talk a little bit? Yeah.
She just describes it as like there was such an incredible energy. The girls would wake up every morning wondering, what did the Rebbe say? What did the Rebbe say? You know, how much closer are we to the ultimate Hisgalos? When are we going to Yerushalayim? And Rabbi Majeski would come in with the fresh off the press and give over the words of the Rebbe. I mean, it was like mamish, like living, you know. It's not like nowadays we go to a Svarim Shank and we take out, you know, Likutei Sichos or Sefer HaSichos or something like that. It's like every day they were just being fed from the night before, you know.
Right. Fresh.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like Crown Heights was on fire. Like there was Mashiach in the brain. It was just very exciting time.
Must be pretty incredible. I know even most shluchim and people who are very involved, they, you know, for good reasons, but they were not in Crown Heights at the time when the Rebbe spoke a lot of the sichos. One of the reasons I think so many of the mainstream Lubavitch kind of forgot somewhat about the message of the sichos is because they weren't there. They weren't, like you're saying, waking up every morning. What did the Rebbe say? They were involved in whatever they were doing, you know, in their Mokaimis HaShluchos, and you know, they had their mission statement, and they didn't necessarily hear every week, every day, a new sicha, a new thing, or they didn't have the time to fully invest and live. Where it sounds like what you're saying, that's what you were living. That was what was going on. The Rebbe.
Yeah, definitely, that was what was going on, and also, you know, as Baal Teshuvas, we were talking about this. Like, you know, I didn't have any respect for rabbis until I started to learn in the, you know, observant sector and orthodoxy. And so I had to develop that respect for rabbis. But then when it came to a Rebbe, and I was, you know, with Rabbi Friedman and Beis Chana, and then even with Rabbi Majeski and the teachers there. So as Baal Teshuvas, not only do you give up your entire life and, you know, change your whole thought process and everything about the world, but you're also told that a Rebbe, especially the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who is the Nasi Hador, the leader of the generation, you're told that nothing he does is a mistake, and everything he does is conscious and 100%, and according to his will. And so, you know, with everything with Moshiach, it was just like, okay, you know what, this is all truthful. It's like even the chaos, even, you know, everything that was going on, the Rebbe would speak now or the Rebbe would speak later. It was just, you know, the whole Seder was out of order, but this is who we were following. Like, Mashiach is alive and well right here. CNN, you know, interviewed the Rebbe. Like, everybody can see that.
One of the things that my wife likes to talk about during that time, just to flesh out the scene of what was happening, was the Rebbe would be speaking at night. Who knows how many nights in a row, for whenever the Rebbe chose to speak. Or
giving something out. The Rebbe's giving something out, you know.
And people would come in. My wife would tell me the stories. People would come in. They'd find out at 8:00 at night in Boston that the Rebbe was speaking in Crown Heights.
Or giving something out.
And people would get in their cars with their kids, their 3 or 4 kids, at 8:00 at night in Boston. And they would come. And this is big every week. they'd get in their cars and they'd come with their kids. I mean, most people, we've gone through that time when we've had young kids and we had to put them in school the next day and all this kind of stuff. It's 7 o'clock bedtime. It's 7 o'clock, you know?
Right.
And at 8 o'clock at night, after the kids were sleeping, they'd wake them up, get them dressed, pack the lunch, pack the dinners, whatever it is, get in the car, drive 3 hours, arrive in Crown Heights at 11 o'clock at night, 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, then stand online with their
little kids. Yeah.
And they get, wait in line for 2 or 3 hours till 2 o'clock in the morning. And they'd get the sefer or the whatever, the dollar, whatever it is the Rebbe was handing out at the time. And, the bracha, and then they get back in. And they may do that more than once a week. I mean,
Wow.
This was going on constantly.
Yeah.
And this was the life that people would come in from, Muncie was, if you didn't come in from Muncie, people were coming in from all over the place.
Yeah. And I remember that first time, and I wrote this in the book, like the first time that the Rebbe was giving something out, it was already 11 o'clock at night. And like the line was so long. And I'm just like, okay, it's time to go to bed. Like, what are we doing? And we just happened to see Rabbi Majeski, who said, no, what you get from a tzaddik, it's just, it's that from that righteous person, it's that much more ingrained in you and that much more helpful for your learning and everything. And like, it was really late. Like those lines were really 6 hours, 7 hours long. And the Rebbe never sat down. The Rebbe literally stood there. I mean, it's beyond to even think about. Because I knew that there was really no place to sit, but at least like there was, bleachers to, lean against or something. But the Rebbe literally just stood and met so many people.
I'm very curious with what information you had about Mashiach before you came, I guess. Like what was going through your mind essentially with the first time you encountered this concept of Mashiach and I guess how much did they tell you about Moshiach and Geula, and what was your impression when you first heard about it?
Yeah.
Is it directed at my wife or myself?
Whichever one of you, because both, I'm saying.
I'm assuming it's very different answers.
Correct.
I think you share. Maybe you knew. I don't think you even knew more.
I mean, I was in Eshet Torah. I was with, of course, we learned about Mashiach, of course. There was Mashiach energy, so to speak. The whole world was moving a little bit closer towards this concept of Mashiach. And even back then, the Rebbe was bringing Mashiach into the general consciousness. But we definitely saw Mashiach as something that, B.S. Gael, who knows when that's going to be. And we definitely looked at it as something, similar to the way we learned the Rambam, the way we used to learn. The way we've learned the Rambam for hundreds of years, type thing. And when I came to Lubavitch, and it really was an eye opening for me. It did not feel normal at all. It felt like these people took some sort of intravenous drug. Besides for the fact that everyone looked like a zombie, if you ask me,
Exactly, because they're
they're just like robots, everyone seemed like a robot, it just
that's what he felt when he first came. Even when he met me, he was like, I was like so Lubavitch obsessed and Mashiach obsessed, and at some point he said to me, no one's ever heard of the Frierdiker Rebbe.
Talking about Lubavitch as if like I should know, all the details. I'm like, where do you think I was? I'm in Yerushalayim, first of all, not in New York. I'm in Eshet Torah. No one talks. The way Lubavitchers look at the world, I learned from her, is that whatever's going on in Chabad is front, right, and center for the rest of the world. As if every other Jew has got this on their lips, and I just looked at her like, literally no one I knew or met, and I met a lot of people. I spent a lot of time in Yerushalayim, Told Asaran and Bells and South Fallsburg and all different places in Chicago. No one ever said anything about Lubavitch, Frierdiker Rebbe, this, that, and she's acting as if like I should be, reading the Allgemeine Journal every day and knowing what's going on in Chabad.
But I will say this.
That's how.
But what was so amazing was being in Crown Heights when the Scuds were going on, when the Gulf War, because there was that, like we had, the Rebbe telling us exactly what was going on. And, obviously it was afraid, it was fearful when the Scuds started to fall, but it was just like, it's like you had a different newspaper that you were looking at and you just felt like, wow, like we have the Rebbe's perspective, and nobody in the world has that unless they're listening to the Rebbe's perspective. And it was so incredible. I felt so blessed and lucky. It was so amazing.
Yeah, I would just, it's we should probably mention that there are so many miracles going on now with all of the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael that are happening every day that, I guess we don't have a Rebbe to clearly show us and tell us exactly, this is a miracle. Let's all thank Hashem for it, like the Rebbe did then. But if the Rebbe did tell us that we need to not make the same mistake Chizkiah made, but to rather open our eyes to see the miracles happening and thank the Eibishter for them. But yeah, then you can actually be there.
Then it was so tangible. It literally was like a different newspaper, because I would go to Muncie sometimes to see my parents who, were lived in Pomona, actually, who were very secular. And you could just feel like not just the emptiness, but like there's a war going on and the scuzz and this and that. But then you go back to Crown Heights and you just felt like, no, there's a whole perspective going on, and it's going to end term time and everything. It was really like you just really feel that your eyes are open to a different way of seeing things. And I know my husband and I feel that way now, even like about Yiddishkeit and Judaism. It's just like our eyes are so different, and it feels like it's the eyes of the mind, But for me, like I had never heard of Mashiach concept. So that was hard because I always thought that was Christian. The Messiah was just a Christian thing. It was their thing. So I was just like, what are you talking about? And then there's like the good times are going to roll with Geula. And wow, it was all brand new.
Who introduced it to you? Was Rabbi Friedman or Rabbi Majeski?
Probably in Beis Chana with Rabbi Friedman. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was then. And again, it was like what a tzaddik is, who the Rebbe is, the leader of the generation, how that makes him different, and Mashiach. Yeah.
Kind of all flows. Yeah, it makes moving back just a second, it reminded me like I remember with either some of my siblings or other people, but especially when you have young Chabad kids talking to other kids their age who are not Chabad, like, you don't know today's Chof Ches Nisan?
Exactly. I remember one of my friends became another one of my friends from Grinnell College.
Right.
Yessel Schwartz, Dr. Yessel Schwartz, he became Lubavitch. It's not really written much about it in the book, but
no, they know of him. Joel.
Oh,
yeah.
Joel, yeah.
Yeah, I would call Joel up and say, like, hey, what's going on
with him? What's going on with David, yeah.
It's amazing. My one trip to Israel and both of the people who I affected, to become frum, both became these radical. I guess it was a matter of time. Me. But I remember once he called me up, and evidently it was Yud-Tes Kislev, and he calls me and he says, good Yontif, And now I happen to be a very absent-minded person, and I was in Chicago when he called me, so I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, what is it, Shavuos? Is it like, I don't know. It was Rosh Hashanah. I had no idea what day it was, but it was just very interesting. He expected me to like, it's the day of the freedom of the Alter Rebbe. Oh, it was just so. And that's a very funny way that we look at the world now.
I think you described it very well, that we have this in our world, in Lubavitcher's world, we're the center of the whole galaxy, and we have it going on. We have the Rebbe, the Moshiach Rabbeinu telling us exactly what's going on. And this perspective irritates so many of the regular Litvish world who say, what do you mean? We have Aguda, we're Das Torah, and you don't even look at us. Like, who do you think you are? You with your Rebbe over here, like.
Yeah, what's that? We do Rambam.
For me, it was an issue because what happened was that I was like, I didn't care. I didn't know the difference, Lubavitch, not Lubavitch. Even when I went to, Beis Chana Rabbi Friedman, like it didn't matter to me. I didn't get the differences, and so I remember I would go to people's houses that I had met from Asia Torah. They were living in the United States. And, but what happened was there was such an antagonism to Lubavitch that when I would sit there for Shabbos, they would say things that weren't pleasant. And it felt very bad to me. And I just realized like, I can't live in those two worlds, and so I stopped going. I remember once a friend called, someone I knew from Israel, she called me up, you want to come for Shabbos? I said, are you going to speak against Lubavitch? And, well, we have our opinions or whatever. I said, no, thank you. I couldn't go because I love Lubavitch. I also loved Aish Torah. I loved Orthodoxy. It was fine at that point in my life. But I can't sit there and hear why I shouldn't, be in Lubavitch or what's going on. And so that battle, I think, is, kind of over nowadays. But
yeah, I was going to say that largely today, it's much more, Lubavitch is much more accepted and considered
Definitely.
much more, I don't know, normal. I don't want to say normal, but
Still not normal. Still not there yet.
Not normal. And it's very funny because even sometimes now I'll speak to people, I'll go to Tehillim groups where there are non-Lubavitchers, and I'll use language that's so common to Lubavitchers about the soul or this or that, and they haven't heard of it. And it's just like, wow, in some ways,
you still have a lot of work to do.
We still have a lot of work to do as Lubavitchers. We really got to get the Hasidus, pumped out there to more people so they understand it's like Mashiach language,
So we mentioned the Scud missiles, the whole war in Eretz Yisrael, and you mentioned your perspective in Crown Heights, how it was. David, you were there. You were in Eretz Yisrael at the time.
At that time, no. I was actually learning here in Chicago in Tel's Yeshiva over here in Chicago. Oh. Yeah, but I was not there. No.
I thought he was there.
Right.
I didn't know where he was.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And
we're like, there was.
Right. What was the perspective in Chicago? How was it? What was the conversation?
I mean, essentially fear-based. A lot of fear surrounding what was happening. People were confused. Everyone was a lot of anxiety, low confidence. What you would expect. From regular people who don't have the insight of the Rebbe. The Rebbe's approach and the energy that he put out was definitely unique. It was not something that was shared by Gedolei Yisrael or anything of that sort.
Were there discussions about what the Rebbe was saying? Like,
again, if anything, it would have been, another crazy thing is coming out of, 770 type attitude, not
right.
Anything that people would say, wow, maybe we should try doing that. Unfortunately.
Yeah, we're mentioning how Lubavitch thinks that everybody's talking about us and thinking about us, and part of what I was expecting to hear from you is like, oh yeah, we think we were talking about Lubavitchers all the time. I'm like, apparently not.
Not even the negative, not the positive, unless you mention the word.
Right. But it wasn't like a topic of conversation, I guess. All right.
As much as we say, okay, the Rebbe goes like this and the whole world shifts, which it does, but nobody else knows that that's what's happening.
Right. People aren't in tune. No, so I wanted to ask you if there, when this whole Non-Aleph and Non-Beis, the whole fervor of Mashiach, if it was, I guess I don't know how much of a topic it was of a conversation, but like was there a similar fervor of like, oh, this is what Lubavitch is saying, and this is what Lubavitchers are thinking, that the Rebbe is Mashiach, and I guess what was the reaction towards that?
Yeah, I think that the number one kind of approach that the non-Lubavitch world had, from my perspective. Now, don't forget, I'm about tshuva like a deer with caught in the headlights. I don't know that much, amazingly, at Aish Torah, we were so privy to have very big Gedolei Yisrael come through the yeshiva just to kind of like meet us and see what's happening. And all of us Baal Teshuvas, we didn't know. We had the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir came, and Rabbi Kanevsky came, and Rabbi Pam came, and all these different people came just to see what was going on. And they would sit in their way for braying with us, and it's just fascinating because people would pay a lot of money from America to go around these tours to get Yechidus or whatever they call it on their version, and they would all just come strolling through a yeshiva. But the main way that they kind of dealt with the Lubavitch issue was to cut us off from really, not cut us off consciously, but they just would silently not mention anything. And the only time that I kind of came into contact with Chabad was when I decided to reach out to my wife and resume the shidduch process with her after years of us being separated. And when that happened, that's when I realized that all of my teachers and rabbis who were much more learned than me and steeped in the Orthodox world were extremely familiar with Chabad and had very strong opinions about what was happening and knew exactly what the Rebbe was saying and were completely aware of what was happening in Crown Heights. It was completely shielded from us in the yeshivas, but these people knew they were watching, the CNN of their thing daily,
The Chabad News Network.
Yeah.
There was no Google. Who knew?
Yeah. And that's when all the stuff came out about the Mashiach and the Rebbe and what was happening in Crown Heights. And it was, it's quite fascinating to me. I mean, to hear that there's I'm going to call the Rebbe at that time a gentleman, a rabbi at that time who was taking the mantle of the Jewish world. I mean, one of their tainas to me was, this rabbi thinks he's the leader of the Jewish world.
That's exactly right.
And some of them are even calling him the Messiah, and that to them was like, blasphemy, so to speak, and like you mentioned earlier, they've excluded themselves from the general Jewish population, and they doing things their own way, and they don't participate in things that we do, and they're on their own derech, in Yiddishkeit, and it's not our way, and so there was a lot of, I don't want to get into a lot of the negative stuff. It's just that they knew exactly what, to answer your question, they knew exactly what the Rebbe was saying pretty much daily.
But they weren't talking about it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't tell it to me until it became an issue. Like, it was like on an as needed basis, they would inform me of what was happening in Crown Heights to make sure that I understood that, I should stay away.
Stay away from them.
Yeah, it was definitely about staying away. But what I found so strange was that the night that the Rebbe had the first stroke, when I went to the dorm, the phone rang. And again, it was a phone booth in the basement. Anyone could have picked it up or not picked it up. But it was Rabbi Aaron Cutler, and he was in South Fallsburg at that time. And, David had already contacted him. But how he knew, how did he get that dorm basement telephone number? And then, this is probably something we can ask him. Sometimes we're in touch with him, and also to call that night, the strange divine providence of calling literally that night.
Adar.
Yeah, and then ask how everything's going. And again, with Chof Zayin Adar, when the Rebbe had the stroke, we thought, oh, this is the transformation. That's how we were thinking. This is the transformation of Mashiach, of Messiah. And so when he asked me how I was doing, it was like, great. Everything's great. And wow. We didn't know it was a stroke. We didn't know it was a stroke. Like nobody in my circles knew it was a stroke that night. The next day we found out, but it was like, great, everything's great, and it turned out that Rabbi Cutler has a very, very amazing stories with the Rebbe also, because the Rebbe was even involved in his mother's shidduch, so that's very powerful. The connection, wow. All these connections are so interesting.
So your feeling at the time and is that there was no universe where the Rebbe wasn't going to take us out of Golos. That was, Mashiach was happening. There was one course. There was
no question.
No strokes are hidden, strokes are heard. There was not.
And it wasn't just my wife. I mean, I was there during that time a little bit later. I came on the scene very shortly afterwards. It wasn't just my wife. I mean, I don't know what picture. No one can repaint my picture. That no one can do because I was there, right? Now, you two obviously are younger than me, so I don't know what you've been exposed to, but I can tell you that there was nobody who was accepted. I mean, there was always some rabbi who was looked down upon somewhere, some Chabad house. Where
maybe I never heard about it.
We lived near one. That was looked down upon like he was an outcast. But everybody was a Moshiachist. The word Moshiachist didn't even make sense. There was no such. You were a Chabad.
Lubavitcher, right?
Yeah, you were a Lubavitcher, right? And it wasn't.
And just to define terms, because people whitewash history. So everyone was a Moshiachist. That everyone believed what? Everyone was thinking what?
Everyone was sitting on pins and needles, waiting with 100% confidence that the Rebbe is going to get up from before Chof Zayin Adar and after.
And afterwards.
And afterwards, that the Rebbe was going to get up and be Megala that he is the King Mashiach that we've been waiting for thousands of years, and march us into Eretz Yisrael with the Beis HaMikdash and the whole thing. Lamata Misar Tvachim, and like whatever else we say every Shabbos after a good Vort.
The real deal.
There was one time that the Rebbe, and I don't remember which date this was, maybe you would know, but where the Rebbe walked into 770. Nobody was even there. It was like Mincha time. Or it was before Mincha time, and the Rebbe didn't even sit in the regular spot. It was like the strangest time. Like that's the whole thing, everything being out of order. And everybody started running to 770. And the Rebbe sat in a completely different spot. It was like the strangest thing. And everybody was just like, saying, it's like, oh, this is it. This is it. The Rebbe is Megal. I mean, we lived on, that's
Wow.
how it was,
And even during the times of, a little bit later after the stroke with the beepers and everything,
Yeah.
I was just telling my son that, we sang Yechi. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, again, you two are a little bit younger, but I don't know how many years ago it was. There was the Kines HaShluchim. There was the Kines HaShluchim that happened, the Mishachist one, where there was this Hasidic guy that got up there and said, we need to say Yechi like a Nun Aleph Yechi. I don't know if you two remember him saying that, a nice Hasidic man that got up there with his,
Triangle.
with
Where in
his triangle.
770?
Yeah, what he did.
Wow,
He was like,
cool.
we have to say Yechi like a Nun Base or Nun Aleph or whatever it was Yechi. And what that, what that means for those who weren't there, we would come into 770 and we'd see the Rebbe sitting in the balcony, and people would be singing Yechi for hours, like hours. And it was packed. And it was like this trance that people would get into. I mean, it really was. If somebody took a video of this, I'm not saying that's not necessarily a good look, but we were hours singing Yechi with such a fire, and like everybody was there. Everybody who was anybody was there. I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't individuals that were in their apartments, whatever. I can't speak for every individual, but that was definitely the energy in Crown Heights. It's like if you ever seen a rocket ship take off, before the rocket ship actually blasts off, there's all this flames and smoke that are coming out from underneath the rocket ship, and that's what's Crown Heights. Like they were just, it wasn't like Countdown. It was past Countdown, and all the fuel was burning from the bottom, just ready to take off.
Because the Rebbe said that like now's the time, and even before Mincha, Mashiach can come, and so it was being built up like that, and then the Rebbe was saying so many powerful words. If as you've read from the Sichas, the women were giving jewelry. It was just, and we needed to receive Mashiach. So we were all trying to find what is the key to make this happen. And obviously we didn't find it in the way that we wanted to, but so that was hard. But we thought even the singing of Yechi, because what is that? It's receiving. Mashiach. So if we sang loud enough, strong enough, it's like letting God know, letting the Rebbe know, like we are here, we're ready.
Yeah, there's
Very curious. Oh, go for it.
It's just so good to hear it, because it's so important. Like I was saying before, people whitewash history, especially because it's so many years later. It's so important for people to hear. We also obviously have the Rebbe Sichas, but also all of the, like you're describing, what we call the Aron, the atmosphere of what it was like to be there. What was the mainstream? People like to think whatever's mainstream. That's what people like to believe. But to hear that was the mainstream thing at the time. That the Rebbe's Mashiach, he's taking us out of Galus. We need to agree that this is happening, and that most importantly that it matters and that it's important. One of the biggest things, and I've heard this even from some very big mashpiyim and important people, who cares who Mashiach is? He'll come whenever it happens, and let me know. We'll do the Torah mitzvahs, and that was just so much not at all. That's just not a thing at the time.
We needed the point. This is Mashiach. Mashiach's alive and well, and Mashiach's right here now.
The way everyone understood the Rebbe's, what the Rebbe wanted us to do at the time, when the Rebbe was actually saying the Sichas, was that it does matter, it is important, we should focus on this, and let's all get involved and then greet Mashiach and then make it happen.
Oh,
Yeah, and Menachem Shmo, his name is Menachem. Without the Rebbe never said, "I am Mashiach."
Right.
Never,
It
ever.
is so funny to
But
hear
everybody
people.
was. I mean, it was so close
Well,
to
he
saying.
said that his father-in-law's Mashiach, so it's either him or his father-in-law. So yeah,
It's funny that exactly
either one is fine. You know?
But it's so funny to hear people kind of like, I've been in some of these sessions here in Chicago where they're like dissecting what the Rebbe meant by these sichas and all these. Well, he didn't really say it's him, da, da, da. And it's almost, it's cringy, but and ironic and hysterical all at the same time to hear people try to recreate what the Rebbe actually meant when we were there. You know,
Yeah.
you're trying to tell me what the Rebbe meant. I was there, you know, and my wife is there much more than me, you know, and now that I'm looking through the way they're being medaic and trying to make a point off of this thing and point off of that thing, and I was like, no, you don't understand. Like you got it all wrong. Like you're totally off, you know. And I don't know, you know, Eino Doime Rila Shmiya, you know, it's completely different.
Yeah. The Rebbe speaks about it when it comes to the Constitution with regards to the moment of silence. Like, you have to look at the context. Who are the people? Everyone, all these judges sitting here, you know, inventing penumbras in the Constitution. It's like, that was like, do you know who these people were who wrote it? They were very religious. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what, you got to know the context of what was going on then. Like, before you start making stuff up about. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, it's funny because we you know, all Litvish people and Orthodoxy and other Hasidim and everybody, you know, we pray for Mashiach, Messiah, every single day, many times a day. We talk about it. Everybody's talking about it now. Since October 7th, everybody knows this is the only answer. But who are they thinking? Like, who are they voting in for Mashiach? Like, who are they pointing to? What are they? He's going to fall from the sky? And Lubavitchers actually say, like, or at least, you know, Lubavitchers who want to say it, the Rebbe is Mashiach, and yes, there's a source that that Mashiach will come from a place we can't see, but we know who it is.
Yeah, right. It's definitely a thing that Lubavitch has to step up and do. Is that everybody's looking, everybody's right? You're saying after October 7th, this is the only answer. This is the only thing we have left. Like in Chof Zayin Adar, everybody was like, of course, the only next step is the Rebbe to stand up and reveal himself. There was no thought of like after, and like, yeah, Lubavitch has to go and do it. Like Rabbi Wolf was saying, how he felt that we need to. This is our job. Our job is that the Rebbe gave us everything. He revealed everything. He put himself out there, and for us to bring it to the world and to bring everybody to Mashiach. And it's just very interesting. I'm very curious, actually, Miriam, if you can, I guess, talk to the point of when, as you were becoming more firm, you always had questions. You were always like questioning, and you never really like your story. You never fully accepted it in the beginning. It took time. You weren't so into it, and I'm very curious as to, I guess, was Mashiach not the same? Did you not have the same like thing, or it was just like you jumped right in? How did that work out in your mind? I guess if you can talk to that.
Yeah, I think that actually was like a pinnacle for me. It was, you know, I'd always been so concerned about suffering in the world. I was always pained by it. I used to work with animals and you know, whether it was pollution, all this kind of stuff. So I really wanted a better world. So when I got into Judaism and observant Judaism, and that was like very excited, and I started to take things off. And once the carrot was gone from the stick, and I really had to make the decision, I'm doing this for me. So then my learning did accelerate, and I really kind of put my whole self in, even though there's always going to be questions about God and how could this be, and Holocaust stuff. But, you know, but I think what it was that I was really looking for a world that there wouldn't be suffering. So when I heard about Geula, redemption, and Mashiach, it was just like, okay, like, that's fantastic. That's what I want. This is what I want. So instead of healing one seal at a time, let's just like do the whole thing at once. So I think that was like, for me, and it still is for me, everything. It's for me, everything. October 7th, it's less like, let's get our acts together, guys, because, you know, there's nothing else. There's
even
nothing
why
else.
You wrote your book.
Even why I wrote my book. I mean, in terms of being obsessed with Mashiach.
Yeah, my wife all the time, the whole 8 years that it took her to write that book, all she kept talking about is, I'm doing this for the Rebbe, I'm doing this to Mefarsim in the world, Mashiach in the world. She goes, yes, it's our story. Yes, we're characters in this situation here, but the real driving force for my wife is that she wants the world to, somehow through our story to hear and learn about the Rebbe as Mashiach.
Yeah, and that the Geula, and that the world is going to a better place. Because when you speak to secular people, it's like, okay, the world could end, or pollution, or global warming, or something like that. And I want to say, like, no, there's Kabbalah, there's Jewish mysticism, we're moving towards a revealed good, not a revealed bad. And so that's like just my whole, I was like this before. I got into Yiddishkeit because I was wanting to save the world, or refugees, or something. And then when I found out about, Mashiach being a Jewish concept and everything, I'm like, okay, let's make this happen,
Yeah.
That was your selling point, essentially.
The whole
I was already involved in Judaism, but I really loved this point. This was exciting.
I'm saying it connected. You connected to it specifically.
It resonated. The whole mindset of this Tikkun Olam style, let's fix the world through social justice, which is extremely prevalent now. I guess it's a sign of Geula. It's a sign of this Mashiach energy is in the air. People didn't always want the world to be a better place. Like we take it for granted now that the bad people are the guys that are trying to fix the world this way, and then the good guys, everyone is. How do we fix the world? But you got to stop killing people. You're killing civilians. Like how dare you? I mean, it's not about that really. But even the supposed bad side is misguided Mashiach energy. When you look historically, everyone was like, no, let's kill everybody. Those were the heroes. So the world has taken a decided turn towards Mashiach energy. It's in the air. People, so often we're scared of our own shadow. We're scared to talk to people about Mashiach. What are they going to say? What are they going to think? It sounds Christian, but everybody like you're saying, this was so good for you to hear this. Oh, wow, Mashiach, that's what I'm looking for. People want to hear about it. We have to talk to them. People are waiting to hear, oh, you mean there's an actual person, Mashiach? He's going to take us out of Geula? That's great news. That's not
That's great news. We're going toward good times of revelation, and it was so interesting because I became a coach just a few years ago, or about 10 years ago, and non-Jewish coaches were telling stories and quoting the Baal Shem Tov. It was crazy. It was like, wow, or Matisyahu like beating out, the Baal Shem Tov story and about Mashiach, like out in loudspeakers to people who weren't even Jewish. Like the world is so ripe and ready for, like, again, better times, revelation, and someone like the Rebbe who so caring, so compassionate, he sees into your soul. He wants what's best for you. I mean, it's just like, how hard can this sell be,
Yeah. If we're inspired about it, we'll be able to. If we can convince ourselves somewhat about it, we'll have a bit easier time trying to convince other people. But that's not that it should stop you, but that's where it's got to start, to convince yourself that this is real, this is happening, this is something we have to care about. And like honestly,
that Mashiach flag that was that and the journalist trying to say, or the reporter trying to say, CBS, like Moshiach. Like,
what's this new flag?
People who know, it's so
exciting.
It before.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanna go back to I guess the story, your story, and I want to ask David. I want to ask you, I guess, when did you again, like you said, you weren't the Lubavitch, and then when you started the whole Mashiach process and getting into Chabad for you, I want to know.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you two things that were really, first of all, I just want to thank all the Lubavitchers and the rabbis along my way, including Rabbi Aaron Dovid Gans and Rabbi Majeski, and many people who definitely helped me with my own personal journey. I connected much better to, since I thought most mainstream Lubavitchers like Robotrons, so I would hang out and spend time with people who had come to Chabad. And that's one of the reasons why Rabbi Reuven Wolf and I had hit it off so well because he came from the. I mean, I dipped my feet into a similar background as where he had come from, and so, that was a big part of my journey was, having the opportunity to learn with some great people. I'll tell you one story. There's a Rabbi Shane who's from Teaneck, and he'd come to Monsey, I think during his Sheva Brachas, and a young man. I was a few years older than him, and it was his turn to speak at the Verbringen or the Sheva Brachas, and he gave over the Rebbe Sicha about Purim. I think I forgot the
our Sheva Brachas?
No, his Sheva Brachas.
Oh, his Sheva Brachas.
Yeah. And when I heard him speak about the different levels of the neshama and what was going on in the whole Gemara and in the Midrash there, and the way the Rebbe explained it, my mind, and I'll never forget it. I mean, I know to everybody who's learned sichas before, it's like, okay, this is just another one of the Rebbe sichas. But you don't understand, I was a very good student in yeshiva. I went from Esha Torah to Lakewood and to an all-Israeli yeshiva. I spent hours in the Beis Midrash learning some of the top rabbis there. Now, I'm not a Gaon or anything close to that or anything like that. I'm just saying I was exposed to the top of the top. And I had never heard anybody give over a pshat and a understanding of a section of Torah the way he had given it over directly from the Rebbe's words. I was like in shock. I never heard that, never heard anything like that. And I said to myself right then, I wasn't Lubavitch at the time. I was davening in the Tzemach Tzedek Shul with Rabbi Vichno Alav Shalom because that's where we lived in Monsey. And at that moment, I said to myself, this is something I have to get involved in. Wow. That was like my first, because I you could talk all day long about the Rebbe and this rabbi and politics and what is the meaning of Hasidus, but when I heard him give over that Torah, it just went right into my heart and right into my soul, and it was amazing. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, as you gentlemen have already uncovered from that previous podcast, is I had the schus of learning with Rabbi Wolf pretty much every day. We were chavrusas in Kollel in Monsey. So not only did we learn Nigla together, which he's obviously very talented. Now that I'm older, I realize he was just really doing me a chesed. He wasn't, he was like tutoring basically. I should have paid him for tutoring me. But at the time, I felt like, okay, I'm learning with this guy, and then we would spend hours. I wish it was hours every day, but we spent many hours over the course of our relationship learning Hasidus. And one of the things that only Rabbi Wolf, in my estimation, can do so brilliantly is he started me out with like learning the Alter Rebbe's Torah, and then we moved down to the Mittler Rebbe, and then through the Tzemach Tzedek, and he would choose specific memoirs specifically dealing with this concept of his galus of Hasidus.
The revelation of
Hasidus. The revelation of Hasidus. And he did it very methodically. And by the time we got to the Rebbe, I didn't even need to learn anything the Rebbe had said. I was already, by the time we finished the Frierdiker Rebbe's Torah, I already knew what the outcome was going to be. There was no
now other... you knew who the Frierdiker Rebbe was. Now you know.
Yeah, I figured it was. So like there's different approaches, to how to become a chassid. I needed the more intellectual approach. That's just the way I am. But it was clear from the learning and from the understanding that I had received, and Rabbi Wolf wasn't alone. This is the general attitude of all the Lubavitchers back then, that L.P. Hasidus, L.P. all of Torah, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu till 1994, there was no other option than the Rebbe being Mashiach. And so that was the chinuch I got.
So to the first point you made, I could just talk personally. It's so satisfying to hear the Rebbe's explanation for a Yom Tov and a Maimer, or the Rebbe's answer to one of these what's called a klutz kasha, these obvious in your face questions that nobody asks about the most rudimentary and basic things in Yiddishkeit or Yom Tovim. and you know the answer is going to get to the heart of the matter, and it's going to be so satisfying, and it's going to really shed a whole new light on every level and explain, oh, this is what it is. It's not like, okay, you've answered the question. It's like you've got it. It's this is what Purim is. This is what this is what this mitzvah is all about. And that's really what Chassidus is here to do. They just started. I learned in 770. They're just starting now to give shiurim on the Kunteris and Yanishal Tyrus Chassidus. I mean, haven't started learning it now, but I've learned it before. It's where the Rebbe goes through, explains Moda Ani according to Pshat, Ramesh, Dush, and Seid, according to Chassidus, and explains how Chassidus is the highest of everything, and how now that Chassidus isn't Pshat, Ramesh, Dush, or Seid, it's Chayas. And now that you have this Chayas, this Pshat according to Chassidus, you go back and revisit each of the Pshat of Pshat, Ramesh, Dush, and Seid, the simple way, the way of hinting, and the way of exegesis, and say this, the secrets of Torah, the Kabbalah, and you see how each of them have now been breathed into them a whole new energy. Now the Chassidus is here to light them up, and that's really the way you feel. I guess by me, at least, particularly by the Rebbe's Chassidus, but by each Rebbe, probably by each Chassidim of the Rebbe, that's how they feel.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It was eye-opening for me because, in Lubavitch schools, like one of the big things is they teach you, you have to make your own chedushim. So that's like the big thing. So let's just say on my vort, so I took a look at a Teshuvas that I had learned, and I compared it to Rashi, and then I kind of came up with some drush about the difference, the way they're learning this sugya, and then I compared, then I connected to the to the vort, to my wife, and this and that, and it's nice, it's good. I like doing it. It's fun, and it's beautiful when a Jew is able to look inside and come up with a chiddush, right? And that was like the extent to which a lot of the Torah that you learned reached, which is beautiful. But there's there's not even words to describe the difference between something like that, as beautiful as it is, to what I heard this gentleman speaking about. I was shocked.
Amazing.
Although, for the record, the Rebbe encouraged everyone to write Chidushim, and then everyone has to write Chidushim, and Chidushim and Chassidus, everyone according to their level. That was something that I probably should work on. But the Rebbe was highly encouraged that to write Chidushim in books. It doesn't matter if it's the most accurate or not. Try, write, publish. That was always the Rebbe's constant refrain. You see in dollars: publish, write books, do it. You see in letters, when's the next book? This is for the next book. This is
Yeah, it's amazing. And what's interesting too is that from my end, it's kind of like I had this answer from the Rebbe that he would become a Lubavitcher. And meanwhile,
do you want to tell over that story?
I can, just because like from the other end of things. Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Do you comfortable saying it over?
What?
That whole section of the book?
Oh, why? I shouldn't surprise everybody or something.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler. This whole thing is spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
The Rebbe was very instrumental, obviously, in us coming together, basically.
Right, but it was just like, again, what the Rebbe says, again, as a Baal's Tshuva, as someone who is, becoming more observant of Judaism, what I had learned about the Rebbe is that what the Rebbe says happens, that's it. And there wasn't a question, there's no mistakes. And so I feel like that was also part of my book, and part of my journey was that it looked impossible for the Rebbe's words to come true about my husband. I mean, Rabbi Aaron Cutler was his rabbi and had told him, don't learn Tanya with a Lubavitcher, like the whole thing. And we lived up in South Fallsburg in that area,
Aaron Cutler Jr., to clarify.
No, it was the grandson, So yeah. I said to myself, well, how is he going to become a Lubavitcher if I don't make him one, which is exactly the opposite of what a woman is supposed to do, a wife is supposed to do. So I said, talking about Lubavitch and this about Lubavitch and this. How could you not know the Rebbe's Moshiach, the whole thing? And finally, Rabbi Jeski said, don't say anything about Lubavitch. Don't say Lubavitch. Don't say anything. And it was when I shut my mouth, that everything unfolded. We winded up moving to Muncie and Rabbi Ruvain, and like Hashem just came through in the way it was meant to be. But, it's just so fascinating is that what the Rebbe said, which looked impossible, came true. So we can say that now with Geula, Mashiach, whatever it is. What, the Rebbe said it, it's true, that's it. Period. It's going to happen.
So when you connected with Rabbi Wolf, that was Tufshin and Beis, that was 1990, 91, 92?
Yeah, 92,
No, really?
93.
Oh, yeah, okay.
92.
It was after the stroke, so it was like 93.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 94.
Yeah, because my whole letter to the Rebbe about whether
Right,
I should
was after the stroke.
was after the stroke.
So I guess if you can talk about what happened when the first time when the Rebbe came out on the porch, I guess you weren't in Crown Heights, you were in Muncie already.
Yes.
So you were in Muncie for Simchas Torah, or you guys went in? Did you guys do that during Yom Tov? We went in.
Yeah, the first time I saw the Rebbe was in Rosh Hashanah. I believe it was 1993.
In Yom Kippur, you were there too.
Yeah, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah for 1993, and that's when the Rebbe came out, and it was just like I said, the whole shul was turned around. Everybody was diving to the other side, which we're not used to doing now. And it was like even then it was complete chaos. It was some people had a sitter, some people didn't have a sitter. No one cared about a sitter because they're like, the Shechina is right there, who needs a sitter?
People couldn't dive on their smartphones back then.
It was such a all the energy in the shul obviously was focused on the Rebbe, and it's been such a long time, I don't remember which exact times I was there that the Rebbe came out, for how long, but obviously that was the main event. The shul was packed. Obviously,
you got honey cake, I think, from the Rebbe, right?
Yeah,
didn't you? You were in line. You were there with Rabbi Reuven.
Anyway, so I felt the energy in the room itself was so uplifting and so majestic. We talk about Malchus, right? And I think this is an interesting point too. As it says, Ein Melech Bli Am, and I believe that it's not just there's no king without a nation. And one of the things that I learned when I was in Crown Heights, it's not just you have to have followers to be a king, but the followers believing you're the king makes you the king, and that's how it felt in Crown Heights. So it was like the energy in the room, the way people were eagerly, with bated breath, waiting, and then when the Rebbe would come out, people would just be in awe and just so thankful and grateful to have a glimpse of the Rebbe and to be able to, look at every single thing the Rebbe did and to sing Yechi to the Rebbe and to just, participate with having the Rebbe there in the room. Was just, the energy was insanely high, incredible energy. And as coming from where I was, I remember a story once where I was in Yeshiva Negev, Rabbi Yisachar Meir, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva there, and they were very kind to me, all good people and everything like that. And I remember one time there was a bus that was leaving the yeshiva to go to Bnei Brak. So I asked, what's this bus for? They said, oh, the Rosh Yeshiva, because really the yeshiva there was connected to Panovich. So the Rosh Yeshiva in Panovich is giving a talk tonight. And literally, I don't know, 20% of the kids went on the bus. The bus was basically empty, leaving to go see the Rebbe.
No, not the Rebbe.
Their Rebbe.
Rabbi.
Whatever. Anyway, the point I'm trying to say is not to in any way put anybody down or anything like that. It's just that it was a completely different way. I'd never seen anything. The kids I'd never seen anything like this, where it wasn't the 20% of the Lubavitchers that were paying attention to the Rebbe. It was 110%, giving 100% of their energy.
And nobody thought then that maybe the Rebbe didn't know what he was doing, chas v'shalom, and who knows if he's really encouraging it or he just wanted to be happy that with the Chassidim. These thoughts, nobody had such a...
If anybody were to say such a thing, you've heard of chapsim, right? Like, you've heard of that?
Yeah.
If anybody were to even utter such a word, I can't even imagine that going through somebody's mind. But certainly not Bedibor. That's nothing like that at all. It was the Rebbe was every tnua up there, every motion that the Rebbe did, when the Rebbe blinked, when the Rebbe, leaned forward, leaned back, the angle that the Rebbe looked at, where the Rebbe was looking at, how long the Rebbe was there for. Everything was meduyak to the greatest.
Yeah, you knew the Rebbe was completely in control. Even when people would write, people were writing to the Rebbe. Look at the answers we were getting. Rabbi Groner would read it, and there was no
everyone
question.
took the Rebbe's word. Nobody had any doubts about
Zero doubt.
It's so refreshing to hear this perspective, because I would say a vast majority of Chabad Hasidim today don't, if they can help it, ever look at any of these videos from Tafshin and Gimmel, because they say that they don't want to see the Rebbe that way, which I hear that. But if people what people, I guess these people don't see in the video, which some people do, and what you're describing was definitely the feeling of the people there, the love of the Rebbe, the way that, if any people say, it's the phrase Melech b'yafei tachzanei necha, that you should see the king in his glory, which some people say, this isn't the way the Rebbe looked in his glory, but in a certain sense, he was the most like a king then. He was the king on his balcony in front of all of his subjects, and everyone's singing Yechi, everyone's singing Long Live the King. Maybe the Rebbe wasn't healthy, but in people didn't care about that, because it was clear that the Rebbe was taking us out of Galus, and this is some weird spiritual hiccup, and they all love their king, and they're all waiting for him to take them out of Galus, and it was palpable. And if you kind of see that, you see the fervor, like you were saying before, the cultish fervor of the Chassidim then, and this, we have these videos, so you try to picture it and to care about it and see, this is happening. So that's really a different perspective on these videos.
Oh yeah, I'll just say one thing about that. When I first was starting to go to 770, I wasn't wearing a kapatza, and I still had a trim beard. And so when I walked in, it was clear to the Chassidim that I wasn't fully Lubavitch or Lubavitch at all. And so I remember like it was yesterday. One of the Chassidim, I was standing next to one of the Chassidim, and we're singing Yechi, and I'm singing Yechi with them. And he looks at me and he says, he looked at me, and he just, the only thing he said to me was, he says, "Don't worry about not being here sooner. You've come at the best time."
Who said this?
Rabbi Eisenberg.
Oh,
he's come at the best time, and that really touched me, because I was like, I didn't know. I mean, there was so much. Obviously, the whole history from 1950 to all the good stuff in my mind, I missed. And so there was some sadness, and he just looked at me. He didn't talk to me about it. It wasn't like I even shared that feeling with him. He must have just known how I was feeling from the way I was singing and the way I looked. He says, "Don't worry about missing anything in the past. You've come at the best time."
I heard just from my father, must have been yesterday, a couple of days ago, how, my generation, me and my brother-in-law, we look at people like him, like, oh, you guys were there in the good days, what was he there for? And he was born in the Lamed, he was there in the Mems and the Nuns. And he wasn't even Lubavitch, so, at the beginning, so he was there mainly later in the Nuns. It's like, oh, you were there in the good days. He says, but from his perspective, he was missing the good days from the Chofs and the Yuds, whenever it was all a big family over there with Rebbe and all the Bachar. But like you're saying, the truth of the matter is that, that's the best time. We're so much closer to the Geula now, and being by the Rebbe then, that was the climax. And we look back, what would it be like to be like by the Baal Shem Tov or by the Alter Rebbe? It's like, we've got it,
Yeah.
We're still in it. I'm saying this is the best time.
Well, we can't see the Rebbe, but good times are coming.
In Chicago, we had this years later, fast forward many, many years later, my wife and I hosted a Bachrim program here in Chicago, where we brought a bunch of Sfatim here to Chicago, probably around 2002. 2004, I believe it started. You guys may know Yoel Kaplan. I don't know if he was a shliach in India, and some of the other Sfatim that are Melech Taylor and all these guys. They came here and they lived here in Chicago with us. But in any case, from their perspective, interestingly enough, there's a whole Teres HaChasidus of how actually their time is the best time. And it's kind of like how the Rebbe Sicha of how the moon in its full glory is not as
It's
poignant.
furthest away from the sun, but when it's Rosh Chodesh, it's
The
it's the
darkest.
nearest.
When it's dark. So now they've taken the new mantle and they say, okay, no, this is the time, because we're actually, when the Rebbe is not revealed, this is actually the time. Like, we're beyond his galas, we're beyond Gilui, and we're like, it's
Yeah, that's yeah, no, there is definitely something to we have to build up and cultivate our relationships now, which makes them more meaningful, and like you have more etzem, more of the essence, like in Las Gile. But the Rebbe also taught us that the Rebbe says that it's actually a Gimmel Tammuz mimer. There's two mimarim for Gimmel Tammuz, and one of them is called Asamna Shenu B'Chayim. And in that mimer, the Rebbe explores the whole idea of Kairach, that he was a bit of ahead of his time, and he says, well, if darkness is really, like you're saying, if the darkness is really better than Revelation because it has the essence, then let's just go straight to that. And the Rebbe explains what he was missing is that there will come a time with the Geula that the darkness will shine. We'll see how that too is revelation of Hashem. But the way during Gullus we reveal that, the work we need to do to make that happen is to actively desire revelation. And that kind of reveals, because we're in the darkness and we're desiring the light, and that reveals that makes that in the future, lots of loving, when Mashiach will come, we'll have the darkness shine. So it's kind of both. We have to know that we are living, that we have the essence now, we have the Rebbe, and yet we obviously still desire to see the Rebbe and want to, we're not complacent with our current situation in Gullus. So you got to work these two things together.
That's Judaism. Everything's a contradiction.
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about Yechi and seeing the Rebbe encourage it and all these things. And I want to ask you, Miriam, when's the first time that you heard this phrase, and what was the reaction? What was the conversation with Rabbi Majeski around this phrase, and I guess how it took off and all that?
I was close to Shifra Chana Hendry. I was working for her. And so she was part of the women's organization who were bringing the jewelry to the Rebbe and talking about receiving, the Rebbe as Mashiach. So I was really in it, but I don't remember the first time hearing it. But again, it was like, it's all part of the same package where we want this revelation in the world because it's gonna stop suffering. It's just gonna be no more anti-Semitism, no more suffering, only good things for everyone, and the revelation of what we're here for. And so, if that was part of it, saying that to receive the light of Messiah, okay, so I'm doing it, and I'm on board, and that whole kingship and royalty thing. And so it was just being taught in the school. It was at the dorm. It was just everywhere. It was just, there was not a question. Everybody was doing and saying the same thing. Even when I would go to Muncie, everybody was just all on board.
So Kabbalah's claim Mashiach Kenu meant like receiving the face of Mashiach. That meant receiving the Rebbe as Mashiach. That was the understanding.
No question. Of course. There wasn't anybody else. Nobody else had the position.
Why bother saying it if you're not talking about
it? There's a prevalent, I would say, I'm assuming, I guess, most shluchim hold that because they don't focus on this, but that it refers more to the idea of Mashiach or Geula at large, and we have to cook more in that, but people shy away or are frightened of fully embracing the idea that it literally means exactly what it sounds like in its most simple sense, to go greet Mashiach,
Yeah. I personally, just to vent just for a second, I personally respect shluchim more who say, whatever the Rebbe said back then was 100% true, and for whatever reason, I fell off the bandwagon, more than people who try to revise the words of the Rebbe to mean something which they clearly did not at the time. Okay, somebody's not into it right now. Fine, so you're not into it right now. Okay, I don't blame anybody for whatever choice they're scared,
going to lose followers,
whatever it is. There's people that admit it. There's people that just say, that's something that happened to us because we haven't even talked about this. But after Gimel Tammuz, my wife and I felt it was a very interesting time for us, because here we were, and specifically in Muncie, surrounded by very given over Hasidim, much more than me ever. To this day, they're still given over to the Rebbe more than me. And they were the ones that convinced us, without a shred of hesitation, that the Rebbe is Mashiach. And then after Gimmel Tammuz, I hate to say, but there was a big handful of prominent people who, not right away, it took a while, but then fell off, and it was just a very strange experience for my wife and I, because here we are, these two Baal Teshuvas just walking around Muncie. We're still Moshiach,
and Yechi,
and then like slowly it's like people are falling out, they're like dying off the side of the road, and like the people that raised us,
Yeah.
I'm not wearing the beard and kappata, except for the fact that you told me that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's so interesting.
And it was just such a strange irony, here with these two Baal Teshuvas barely could, know anything, quoting this, we could barely pull a phrase out of a sikha here or there. But one thing we knew, which is not only did we know that the Rebbe was Mashiach, but we specifically knew it because all these people
had told us.
Exactly, not just told us. It was their oxygen. And
they raised us on it.
And I respect that. I respect a person like that, who I'm still friends with some of these people for sure. Much respect to them, But I respect that much more than people who are trying to now reconstruct what was said and how it was said. And the Rebbe didn't really mean this. And are you kidding me? Admit that you're like a regular person, a good person, and then you're just struggling like many people. Fine, I got it. But to rewrite history in that way feels like such a violation of what actually happened.
It's so interesting. Can you talk more about after Gimmel Tammuz and the feeling and how you ended up with the conclusion that you ended up? Who did you talk to? What were the conversations that you had with each other and yourself? And
Rabbi Majeski always stayed the path, and we were very grateful because he was our mashpia. He never changed. Always stayed the path, no matter who fell by the wayside. Rabbi Majeski always was strong and knew exactly what happened during that time and never changed his anything. So that was great. But when we were in Muncie, and my husband, was saying Yechi and Shol, which was perfectly fine. Rabbi Bechman had said it was perfectly fine, and then one time he came home from Shol and he said, that he had said Yechi. And some older, chassid had come over to him and yelled at him and embarrassed him and everything. I'm like, we're out of here. I don't want to stay here anymore. And this was before Muncie was built up with a lot of Lubavitchers. But so we did leave and we came to Chicago, which was very big, strong, Mashiach place to be. And it happened here too. It was like, so that was.
We're supposed to be mashpiyim, but it's somehow whenever we show up, it's like it goes down.
It's like falling apart here too, and it's just like
I think at first it was very. At first, I can describe kind of like what the transformation, because what happened is that you had people who really went out on a limb, and especially people who had started off as not Lubavitch, like a lot of these Satmar Chassidim. Muncie was full of Satmar Chassidim that had become Lubavitch, and by them, their personality, their persona, their reputation, how they look in front of others is very, very important. As you can imagine, they dress a certain way. It's like everything is very, they're not superficial in their Yiddishkeit at all. They're very, very strict about all these things, and they were some of the most outspoken mishachists that we had. And
before Gimmel
Tammuz. And after Gimmel Tammuz, many of them really struggled with the way that they were being viewed by the outside world.
They were embarrassed.
Many of them were very embarrassed and ashamed. And I don't blame anybody.
They said something and other people looked at them as like, okay, maybe this could happen, that the Rebbe would get up from the hospital bed, and then it didn't. It was like a Shek thing of sorts that Hashem did, like this complete, like what you believe. Like when Hashem said to Abraham, like, go shecht your son, even though you don't believe, and I've told you that you can't do that to people, to kill people and everything like that. Go take your son. And I also told you that I would make from him a whole nation, and go do this. And then Abraham goes to do it. And I feel like the Rebbe, was shechted himself so that we would find our powers within and make this happen, without seeing him.
And it was like originally people would talk about it behind closed doors. So there'd be a lot of like private conversations that people would have, consoling each other and dealing with it and admitting like behind closed doors that they're moving forward in a different path. It wasn't really said publicly. So things kind of continued the way they were. But then eventually there was just enough passivity. They was just so passive about things, and that there was lack of energy. And then that eventually turned to coldness. And then eventually that turned into people just deciding that they were not going to, necessarily wear a Yechi yamak anymore, or they weren't going to say Yechi anymore, or they just didn't respond the same way. So it wasn't like no one came that I remember. No one came out like the next day and said anything like, okay, nice try, better luck next time. Maybe in another 100 years we'll find. Nobody said anything like that. It was just the death of 1,000 cuts, so to speak. And what was interesting for us is that we were, again, we're like these brand new Baal Teshuvas. No one's including us in any of these conversations. So we're just walking around like, where did everybody go? Like, what happened? And Baruch Hashem, we've stayed the same way this whole time.
Same course.
I'm wondering what were you told about Gimmel Tammuz? How did you translate Gimmel Tammuz to mean to continue doing whatever you were doing? I guess for some people it meant like, okay, like you were saying, there were people that felt embarrassed that they were telling everybody that this was it, and then it didn't happen. So I guess for them, I don't know exactly what was going through their mind, but I can assume that it was probably we failed, and now we need, like you said, and now we're going to wait another few years. So I'm wondering, what was it that was like, no, it's still going on? What, I guess if you can talk to that.
It's the funny thing, again, you two probably involved in Kiruv and working with secular people, but my wife and I were laughing about this because we were reading your questions beforehand. And one of the things that we were talking about, which is really, you probably don't think about this unless you're a Baal Tshuva, to us, the idea that the Rebbe was Mashiach, or the Rebbe is Mashiach, is no more or less strange than any of the other things that we had been taught about Yiddishkeit. Literally any of it, that God
wave a chicken over the head.
God actually came down and gave the Torah to these Jewish people who were all standing around Mount Sinai. The Red Sea split, and, all these different things that we Shavuos and Sukkos, and it all is the same. We didn't have any sense of what was normal Judaism, what was not normal Judaism. It all was all superstitious, all completely out of the box, all fairy tales and make-believe. And once we decided that we were going to start taking this on, we don't really have any filters to let us know which message is more extreme than others. So for us, the idea that, okay, so before Gimmel Tammuz, the Rebbe is this Messiah that we've been waiting for 2,000 years, and he's literally going to take the Jewish people, a kanfei, whatever, to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we just toss that in the bag of things that we now believe.
And we don't understand.
We don't understand.
Another thing we don't understand.
And so then after Gimmel Tammuz, so somebody says, okay, well, the Rebbe's still Mashiach, and we're just still going to continue. Nothing's changed. So, okay, there's no difference. It's all, once you swallow one of the pills, they all go down afterwards very easily. Whereas obviously for people who are, from birth people, now that we're older, we see now, we're more experienced, we can completely understand the challenges that they had with these ideas, but we were just blessed because we didn't really need a lot of indoctrination. It wasn't like we were going against something, especially Rebbe Majeski was always sharing all these. He came out with a sefer, I'm sure it's still published, with all these Mara Makaimas about how Mashiach has to go to a hidden period of time and then he's going to reveal himself again, and all these different things that, really weren't talked about no one talked about them before Gimmel Tammuz. all that stuff about Mashiach hiding himself and coming back and all that stuff really wasn't. Maybe people talked about it a little bit because of the stroke, but besides for that, it really, to the extent that, it really wasn't talked about that much that I remember. And
no, it wasn't talked about at all.
Yeah, a little bit. People talk about the stroke as being like that time
that
period.
hiddenness.
Yeah, like
that.
the stroke.
To explain it, to explain that.
Right.
Yeah.
That hiddenness. Okay, so this was a more extreme hiddenness.
It's a continuation. The Rebbe really took it to the next level. Okay. So we didn't really need much, we saw what we saw. I learned what I learned. I knew the people who told me were Ehrliche Yidden, and they still are, of course, Ehrliche Yidden. And there was a conviction that was made, seared like a when you brand a cow. A branding, and that was it. We're done. We had a few years where my wife and I, it's not that we just kind of fell off the wagon a little bit just because of our surroundings.
With what?
With Mashiach, it took like a little while. We took a little break a little bit just because we weren't in a good sviva. But the second we surrounded ourselves with Mashiachs like Rabbi Turin here in Chicago and other Mashiachs here in Chicago, and
or when the Tzvatis came,
it was like back to...
and also like the sources too. Like when we came to Chicago, like I was saying Yechi and believing Yechi, but I thought the Rebbe was just gonna, that Mashiach can die, not get killed, but Mashiach can die and then come back. So I thought, the Rebbe had died and then was going to come back. Like that was fine for me. But then when I spoke to some women here, very, who could really learn and knew everything, they said, no, the Rebbe is still leading us. We need a Nosi. We need a leader. That hasn't changed. You just can't see him. Okay, terrific. Even better.
Wow.
Even better. Writing to the letters, the Igris and everything. Again, it's not that hard. Once you accept that this is the truth and you didn't understand it anyway, and you're waving chickens over your head or, not turning the lights on and off on Shabbos, once you believe. That's it.
It's very interesting because I have conversations with a few of my relatives, and they're shluchim, and they talk about this point. I'm saying how we have to tell everybody b'suras Geula about that the Rebbe came, that the Rebbe it was revealed as Mashiach, and the Rebbe is Mashiach, and the Rebbe is talking about how the Geula is in the world, and all these things, and they're like, what do you expect? You want me to go over to some random person and talk to them about the King Messiah and accepting him? I'm like, listen, you're going over to them and you're telling them about tefillin. It's the same craziness, and like you're saying you experience this, and it's like interesting because you're unpacking it more. But this is what I tell them is, the same thing that you sound nuts when you tell them about tefillin and lighting Shabbos candles. Like what's Shabbos candles? You wave your hands, you cover your eyes, you say a blessing, and all of a sudden it's a new day. Like it's a different, it's very interesting that was the, I guess, what kept you going.
Yeah, you see the Mailav about Tshuva, like you obviously you see the Mailav about Tshuva over at Tzaddik, but I'm not saying that we have this Mailav, but I'm saying you're working with Balei Tshuva, you see that it's like they're just fresh, and they don't, the resistance isn't there, and I'm so hopeful personally that we recognize that by the secular amongst us as well, what we call secular today, that we have to open up our eyes and realize that the resistance really isn't there, and it's just something that we're struggling with more than what they're struggling with.
Yeah, but I remember when I was learning in Israel, and it wasn't a Lubavitch place or anything like that, but I remember, like, I had come to rescue him. I was in the Israelite program, and I was writing on Shabbos. I was up on my bunk bed. I was writing on Shabbos, because, again, I didn't believe anything. I was just there to learn, to get him out. What do I need to learn? And I'll get him out, and then he'll go back to the States, and he'll become normal again. So that's what I was there. But, it was kind of interesting to learn about tefillin and learn about, okay, I'll look at it as kind of like a subject in school. Teach me this interesting stuff that I never heard of before about Judaism, Orthodoxy. So, but I remember I was writing letters on Shabbos, and at some point it was kind of like, it's just a choice. It's just a decision. You decide there's something spiritual that you don't understand at all, and that you can't see, and that you probably can't even feel. But you're just going to decide that if God gave the Torah, and Jews are supposed to keep Shabbos, then you don't turn the lights on and off, and you don't write. And then you are part of that spirituality, and you're doing something very positive in the world that you can't see, and you might not even feel. but you do it because you made that decision that this comes from God and this is what God wants you to do. And that's what it is. And it's like the same thing with Mashiach and Messiah.
That
and
decision
like,
itself creates
it's that
the Shabbos.
decision.
That's one of the things you always talk about. How that decision itself created the Shabbos. Meaning, what's the difference between somebody who keeps Shabbos and somebody doesn't? Somebody who keeps Shabbos in many ways create Shabbos by keeping Shabbos. Meaning, if somebody fell off a time machine and didn't know what day of the week it was, they wouldn't necessarily, the way Hashem created the world, they wouldn't necessarily know that this day, there's tzaddikim that can smell that it's Shabbos, okay? But besides for that, none of us would normally know. But we create that spiritual reality, and I think that's a big part of what the Rebbe is talking about in terms of opening up our eyes, right? And I know this is one of your questions. It's like we create the Mashiach reality by the way we perceive the world, and this was such a kach of the Rebbe. This is such a message that the Rebbe gave us, that we have it within us to bring down the Shekhinah and to reveal the Atzmus and the whole plan merely by us choosing to see it and relate to the world in that fashion.
And decide that they're ready.
In the same way that we keep Shabbos, in the same way that, like my wife said, it's a choice, If you write on Shabbos, it's not Shabbos.
It's not Shabbos for you, but the point is, it's like when the Alter Rebbe was in prison, the Alter Rebbe knew what time it was, because he could see the spirituality and the sefirot that were coming in. Okay, so I don't feel that, I don't see it, but there are people that do, and so they're my guiding light, and then I just, and it's like that decision that this is true, the spirituality is true, and I don't see it. And, that's just the way it is. And it's like the Rebbe also said about, tell the world that Israel belongs to us because God gave it to us, and we can't give, gifts away that Hashem gave us, that God gave us. That's all you have to say. You don't have to get into arguments, this and that. This is what they want to hear, and this is the truth. And so who am I to say about the arguments, to this and that? Don't bother. Just say what the Torah says.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how all of Lubavitch is, so to speak, on board still that we should spread the message that the Rebbe is still the Nosi Adar, which, if you learn the Rebbe Sikhs, kind of also means, like you're mentioning, that he's alive in some fashion. But for some reason, they feel awkward spreading the message that he's therefore still Mashiach, which the Rebbe very clearly linked together, that the Nosi Adar is the Mashiach Shabbat. So if we're still in Dar Shvi and the Rebbe is still the Nosi, he's also still Mashiach, which means that all of this fervor and Mashiach, Kabbalah to Mashiach, Yechi stuff that was going on in Beis and Gimmel and Dalet is no less relevant today by everyone else's own standards. But yet everyone's projecting their own insecurities and assuming that everyone else will feel the same way. And it's good to hear you guys say it from the other side, because I know when I've gone like America Slichas and talking to people who totally fry people and to varying degrees of knowledge, but people with not a lot of at least knowledge of anything, and you're selling them the whole story. Hey, there was this Matan Torah and there's Moshe Rabbeinu and there's this every generation there's a Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's what a Rebbe is. And it's like, and he's Mashiach. Well, obviously,
okay.
And if the Rebbe, every generation, he's our leader, and he's going to take. It's of all messages, the Rebbe's a pretty good Mashiach. I don't know. It's pretty. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
It's so that's at least I've never met somebody who didn't already have knowledge on the subject and an opinion, who I was telling to him, so hold it. No. You crossed the line. That's too far. There's no way. Ain't no way. That's so it's
unless they're from already. If they're from,
they have knowledge already. They have a preconceived notion. But somebody who's starting off without no, I mean the Christians stole it from us. It's the other way. It's the other way around.
Yeah, and that is an interesting nakuda. Also, like you two, obviously you grew up in Chabad. My wife and I, obviously didn't. So if you talk about a shliach that's out in the middle of the wilderness or something, I'm assuming many Lubavitchers are uncomfortable with that particular nakuda, that particular point. And I know it coming from a Torah and coming from the Litvish world, that was definitely something that was, told to me, was one of the downsides of Lubavitch, was that they're sounding like, the non-Jews, lahavdil,
with the Messiah.
Right.
Yeah, with Messiah,
but it's all ignorance. It's just not knowing.
Right.
It's just not knowing. It's just ignorance. And then it's the arrogance that comes along with it, that we know more than you. Like I was watching on Zev Brenner, Rabbi Reuven was there, and some of the questions coming in. And I really felt like writing an article for the Jewish press. It's like, why the keneged? Why they against? Why the excitement about being against? Like, come on, like, do you have a better Mashiach? Do you have a better Messiah? We got to get out of this mess that we're in, and who's going to do it? And the Rebbe's fits the bill. And then again, look at the sources, or learn from someone who knows the sources so well, and open up your mind to that possibility without having to have an agenda against. It's the Yetzer Hara, still being there for people, I guess.
Right. There's the story from Mashiach Suda that the Rebbe was saying about the Mashiach dance, about the Mashiach dance. And the Rebbe said that there's two explanations to the Mashiach dance. One of them is dancing to prepare ourselves for Mashiach, or it's the Mashiach energy, so we're dancing for Mashiach, whatever. And then there's Mashiach dancing with Mashiach, Mashiach dance dancing with Mashiach. And the Rebbe said, wouldn't it be so much better to explain it as we're dancing with Mashiach? And then he stood up and started dancing with everybody.
Wow.
But it's that feeling of like, you have two options. You have an option of being really down and Gullus is so hard and Mashiach seems like such a far off dream and of a utopia and this and that and the other. Or on the other hand, you can be like, no, let's try to find out if Mashiach is coming now, right? Like after October 7th, there was a few people that were posting and it went viral about the Yalkut Shemaini, that the Shana Shemalach HaMashiach by that the year that Mashiach is going to be revealed, it says that the kings are going to be fighting with each other, and then Hashem is going to tell the Jews, don't worry, you guys are my special ones. All these things. It's so much more exciting. It's so much better. It's so much nicer. It feels so much better when it's happening now, or you're telling me that it already happened and we're in the process already. Like you're saying, I don't understand why you're so against it. Why? What?
Right. Yeah. What do you have? And it's so funny that Yalkut Shimoni was from the Gulf War.
Right.
That's where it was quoted in Lubavitch. I mean, we lived that. I mean, that
Rebbe said it was
so
fulfilled then. Yeah.
When I see Litvish people saying that today, I'm just like, wait, you missed the boat. It already happened, and the Rebbe was revealed, and it happened because the Rebbe said, hang up the rest of the Yalkut Shimoni and Shul. Someone was hanging it up.
The guy by Shemikdash. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was then, like long time ago.
I think this also ties into the story of Mashiach ties into what you were saying about opening our eyes, that it's kind of up to us to dictate the reality. The Rebbe says that if it's up to us, let's choose what's loinzuch by uns besser, what comes out better for us, what's more geschmack. Rebbe said, if it's up to us, let's choose the better one. It's just kind of what you're saying, that it is up to us, and let's open up our eyes and choose the one where Mashiach's actually here.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, share that because that was one of your questions. One of the when I was in Asia Torah a long time ago, one of the ways that they would convince you, so to speak, to if you had sveikas, which everybody did, they would say to you, they said, listen, you're going to live till 120. Let's just say you adopt this lifestyle. If you adopt this lifestyle, you get all the benefits, this and that. You get all the pluses. What's the minus? Okay, so we can't ride your car on Shabbos. But the pluses, if you do it, these are all the incredible pluses. So you don't even need to think about it so much. Just make a little calculation.
I believe.
Yeah. And then, and I like to say the same thing. One of your questions was, how do you feel about it now today? And would you have done anything different? I believe that was one of your questions. And that's basically the same answer that I have. You have one life as a Jew to live here in this goof that you've been given with this neshama and this whole thing. Why not spend it, living on the edge of your seat, waiting, anticipating and participating in the Geula? I am so happy about the choice that the way Hashem has helped me, exist during this life, believing and anticipating and getting excited about and looking at the world through this perspective, and having the friends that I have and the community that I have and the chayas of being a Moshiachist and living in this Geula life. We only have one time to do it. It's such a plus, and you're not going to, at the end of somebody's life, Hashem's never going to hold that against you. It's a choice that we have to look at the Rebbe this way and live our life in this way, and raise your children with this positivity and sing and dance with the Rebbe as Mashiach. Why not? It's the best for me. It's been such a blessing, in my life, and I know for my wife as well.
So I guess in short, the answer to the question is nothing's changed, and we're all going.
Nothing's changed, but it hasn't happened fast enough.
All right, so I want to ask you, I guess, being with having this whole, I guess, worldview, how does it affect the life that you've lived from I guess 1994 until now? How does that affect the way you raise your children, the way you do your coaching and all that different things?
So me coming out with my book was very interesting, because I when I got the idea that I'm going to write this book and tell this romantic love story through the Rebbe's, which was really the Rebbe's story through me, for the concept of getting Geula out there, and we're going to a better place. The world is changing for the better somehow, and the Rebbe's Mashiach. So I knew that it was interesting for me, because here I was a coach, and I coach people who are not Jewish, people who are secular Jewish, people they're Litvish, they're Chabad, whatever. And I knew I was coming out of the closet here. I'm telling everybody I'm a religious, Jewish woman, and this is what I believe. And so I was kind of shechting myself, just going but I'm doing this because why? Because I want Mashiach and I want Geula, and I haven't let go of that dream. And so I just wrote a second book, and it's about somatic healing. So it's a little different than my first book, very different than my first book, but it's all about somatic healing, and how the Rebbe says that, in the times of Galus, that the soul gives life to the body, but in the times of Mashiach and Geula, the body will give life to the soul. And we see that through all these healing modalities that are coming out. So I bring it into, so if I'm coaching someone who's, not Jewish or, secular, or just different observancies, I might bring in some Kabbalah, some mysticism, but otherwise it's we're all on this healing journey to see, the bigger picture that's going on in our lives, the bigger picture in our marriages, the bigger picture with our children. And so it infuses everything. For me, it infuses everything.
Amazing. It's very interesting that you're saying about the somatic healing, that there's so many things, and I made a for Adolf Nissen, I was trying to compile a list of people are trying. I'm with the advent of this podcast, I'm talking to a lot of people, and they're trying to ask me of how do I do things. People like to get down to business. What should I do? What do you want me to do different? And all these things. So I decided to put a list together of what I think you should do in order to get more into Mashiach mindset, Mashiach energy, and all these things. So one of the things was that after I said Kabbalas Malchus, that you should accept the Rebbe as Melech, and all these different things. And a part that will change your physical life is that once a week or once a month, to find something in the world that you see is different because the fact that Mashiach and the Geula is already in the world, right? The Rebbe said in Mishpatim that we see already the beginning of Peulosei Shemalach HaMashiach, the effect of Mashiach in the world. So obviously, if the Rebbe said that 32 years ago, everything that has been happening until then has been the effect of Mashiach. So the question is, what now that we're trying to become more Mashiach consciousness, what do you see in the world that is showing that? And so that's interesting. That you're basically saying how this is your life, and you see effect of Mashiach in the world, that we're working on healing of the body.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
The healing of the trauma, the whole, even the way we do our marriage coaching. And my husband comes out, he brings Jewish concepts, on Twitter. He's got an audience of like 40,000, who are mostly not Jewish, who are eating up the truth of like relationships and this steady way of looking at men and women, and and so it's kind of like the Torah being like this saving grace and this steady light on our journey, and bringing that to people, and they love it. They want that higher vibration for themselves and their marriages and their families. So yeah, and the healing too.
So I want to ask you one more question. I guess this is a question for both of you. What do you think if someone would ask you, how can I bring this into my life, and what should I be doing different?
Okay, well, at the risk of sounding repetitious, to me, the first step is always the learning, to learn about Inyanei Mashiach and Geula. It's the same thing with anything in life. If you don't know where you're headed, you're never going to get there, right? So the first thing is to figure out where you're going. For many people, these ideas of Mashiach, whether it's, opening up your eyes for the Geula or bringing the Aleph into Geula, and some of the more basic concepts that we have. What is the role of Mashiach in the world? Simple things, Beis Rabbeinu Bavel. Some of these basic ideas of what Mashiach is going to do to the world, bring to the world, Kaifef is called, Kol Olam, is going to, encourage the entire world even stronger to keep Torah and compel. Thank you. Compel. What is Mashiach bringing to the world? What is the Chassidus behind Mashiach? What's the deeper kavana of the Shechina coming into this world, and how do we, until we understand these concepts, it's hard to see it in the world. So it's just like it says in the Gemara Kedushin that we learn so that we can do. Right? What's greater, somebody a Talmid Chacham or a Chassid? And so we learn in order to do. And it's the same thing here. We're learning in Mashiach and Geula in order for us to become a Mashiach Yid. And what is a Mashiach Yid? A Mashiach Yid is somebody whose eyes have now been trained, like you were mentioning earlier, to see once a week. I like to, I would love to do not once a month, not once a week, every day. There's so many opportunities every day for us to look at anything. And I'm on Twitter a lot, and I'm on all the other things, and I see literally every day. It's a funny thing because I do the Hayom Yom every day in Shul, and then I make up my own Inyanei Mashiach and Geula afterwards. And people always laugh because I just say the craziest things, back to making Chedushim like I was like a Litvak, right? And so I come up with these crazy things, but when we train ourselves to see the world differently through the Rebbe's eyes, it's been 40 years. So through the Rebbe's eyes, we have this chus, we have the ability to train ourselves to see the world through Geula eyes. It's such a privilege for us. And the world is waiting, as wacky as some of our ideas sound, so we, both sides, whether it's what's happening with the encampments in the universities, or whether it's, even October 7th, or, like my wife was mentioning about Eretz Yisrael and talking about what the Rebbe said back in the UN, all the different things that we can bring to the world just for ourselves. And it strengthens your kids and strengthens your family. And there's an edge of positivity there that we have access to, an inspiration that we have access to. So yeah, it begins with the learning, then it's training yourself through the learning to see the world in a different perspective. And when we have that, there's a light about a person. There's a positivity. There's a inspiration for that person that is infectious. And there's a pride too. We're so prideful. I go out on Twitter and I literally bring Inyanei Mashiach and Geula onto Twitter, every day. And Twitter's not necessarily the most hospitable place. It's
formerly Twitter.
And see Rabbi Manos Friedman is talking about Mashiach literally on YouTube. He's got 500,000 followers. Unbelievable. You look at the comment section, you ever want to get inspired, take a look at the comment section on some of his videos. It's insane. Total non-Jews thanking him from top to bottom, admitting that he's always right, that the Jewish nations are the blessed people, and that we carry the torch of light in the entire world. It's amazing what's actually happening.
Yeah, and I think the learning is that's crucial for sure, that people can do every day and start and learn and learn and learn with the right people who aren't distorting the sikhas or anything. But I think also working within, like that's why the somatic healing or the relationship work that we do is that, even on a tiny level, you really need to come to Geula within yourself. So, the arrogance or the judgment of other people or the fear or the jealousy, whatever it is, we've got our things that we do that are not kosher, so we've got to also reach that Geula point within too, and keep strengthening our faith and keep healing from the inside out. If there's trauma wounding or whatever it is, like keep healing. There's so many modalities, and that's the work that I get to do with women, and it's fantastic. It's just fantastic. And so that's something. And then you'd said something about the Armon, the palace. And so for me, it's like I used to have a picture up, and by my desk with the Armon, because this is the palace that had been spoken about many years ago. I loved the picture. It was like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing, like a Moshiach palace, like woohoo, So it was just part of the package for me. I loved it. And then I must have taken the picture down. I don't remember why, but what was interesting was that there was someone was doing, after October 7th, someone was doing like a meditation. His name is Reb Daniel Katz. And so I was listening to him, and he was doing like a meditation, and it was very beautiful. And I saw, like in my imagination, I always wondered, how is it going to be like when Mashiach comes, like the Rebbe is going to walk into 770 and do this with his arm and everything's like changes. Like, what is this going to look like? And of course, I don't, I can never know. I have those answers, but it was interesting because then when I was like, just, part of this meditation and just listening and whatever, then I just saw, like in my imagination, like the Rebbe actually in Eretz Yisrael with the crown, with the robe, with the scepter, like dressed as a monarch, as a king. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, why would the Rebbe come in the Kapata in 770 when really Mashiach's supposed to really arrive in, Eretz Yisrael? So, and then I saw like that, like, and then it was kind of like the Rebbe was going amongst the hostages, and this was before any were released, but like kind of just, with the scepter, like releasing some. And then thank God some really did just, walk out, especially the ones from like Chicago and Evanston. There were two women who actually did. But it was interesting because there was this feeling and this sense for me is like, oh, the Rebbe doesn't have a place in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe doesn't have a makom. Oh, and then I thought like, oh yeah, what about the Armon? What about the palace? There was supposed to be a place for the Rebbe to come to. Mashiach is supposed to come to. And then also just the feeling of like the Rebbe's presence being over all of Eretz Yisrael. But it was very interesting because then a few days later, I was talking with somebody. I was at a Tehillim group or something. I was talking with someone. I told them this what I saw. Like I always thought the Rebbe was supposed to come into 770 with the kapata and the hand movement. But then I saw this image of the Rebbe actually being in Eretz Yisrael as a king with the crown and the robes. And then she said, oh, there's a whole Armon group going on, people talking about the palace. And it was like, wow, that's so important because Mashiach needs a place. The Rebbe needs a place in Eretz Yisrael. So like, when you build it, they'll come, and when we build it, Mashiach will come. Why not? And because it did feel like a lost sense when I had that image in mind of this, like, wow, the Rebbe's, where's the place for the Rebbe? Where's the makom for the Rebbe, and Mashiach. So I don't know. And then like, Rabbi Reuven's involved in it. And it's just like, yes, we need to do this. We need to make this happen. And again, what's stopping it? Fear or politics or narishkeit, foolishness. That's very human, but enough already. Enough. We can't afford it.
We need the tunnel diggers to get.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
mentioned before Kontas Beis Rabbeinu. So there the Rebbe says that the Beis Hamikdash is first going to be revealed by 770, and then from there we'll go to I guess at least Hashem will first be revealed in 770 with the Beis Hamikdash, and then go to Eretz Yisrael. But it's all going to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, but the Rebbe wanted to have a palace for Mashiach in Eretz Yisrael proper. And the other story I thought
maybe Mashiach was already revealed in 770, and and so now the other place is important.
Now we got to have a place that can be revealed in Eretz Yisrael. The other story is somebody Bacham, or some people were discussing outside of the Rebbe's room, what will it be like when Mashiach comes? Like, how is it going to happen with? And then the Rebbe walked out the door, and it was like they were shocked. It was sudden, and the Rebbe said exactly like that. Like, this person, like, and the idea is that, like, this person will be doing this or that, and boom.
Exactly like that. Yeah. And that can happen. Yep.
Wow.
That's very exciting. And to just live with that image and that vision and everything, and it is to have it in our mind as like kind of a vision. It's very interesting because the Rebbe said, when he said, even before I was 3, before I was in Cheder, I would imagine what the world would be like when Mashiach comes. And, that's where everything starts. It starts in our imagination. So we can envision, and that might be something for people to do every day. Envision Mashiach, Geula, the Rebbe coming, whether it's in 770, the Ramon, whatever it is, like that, like this.
Yeah.
Just like that. And that would be a way of
getting involved in building the Armain that actually helps to make all these imaginings concrete. Like you were saying.
Yes,
you get involved in a real king in a real place with a palace, not some fantasy, like some people like to say, the MBD Mashiach, like the Melech HaMashiach will descend. Like, where's it coming from? Right. Yeah.
Exactly. But it starts in the imagination, and then we bring it into form, into the world. So that's something. And even they say in the coaching worlds and everything, like when you kind of want something or desire something to happen, or a healing for someone or whatever, like imagine in your imagination them getting out of the sick bed or whatever, like see it. It's a very powerful tool, the imagination.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you any last words that you want to give to the audience? Any message that you haven't shared yet?
Don't be afraid. Yeah, like what Rabbi Reuven said, that as when he came out and he said Yechi, and he said what he says about the Rebbe, he says, it wasn't as scary as I thought, and we all need to break through that fear. All of us in all parts of our lives, but especially in this part.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Looking forward to watching more of your podcasts for sure.
And thank you for doing this and encouraging people who, are living during a different time and experiencing something, in your age and making it like really real for people. Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing that the younger generation is taking this and running with it. It's something that was always a question when we were younger, whether what's going to be, but it's so beautiful to watch the youth today. So many of them embrace this whole pathway and this whole message. It's terrific. So
thank you. Thank you for leading that and not being afraid.
Of course, and thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody will benefit from it. And of course, if you're watching this, you should obviously share this with other people. Share the message of Mashiach, comment, join the conversation, let us know what you think, and obviously subscribe so that this can reach as many people as possible. And I hope everybody has a beautiful week, a beautiful day, a beautiful year, and we should finish this with the Hizgalus, the full revelation of Mashiach coming in. The palace should already be built,
and the hostages released completely, free, and
all having Yeshua. Right?
Yes.
Amen. We want Mashiach now.
The only answer.
ועד כדי כך המדבר גולהוב עד העם זול מחי זין יחי המלך